Defending jobs. Workers at plants down tools in protest over job cuts. Fresh onslaught. Tuareg rebels in northern Mali launch attacks against government troops. And Kenyan Parliamentary Committee quiz top security chiefs over the Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi. Welcome to Africa Live on CCTV News with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. Bleak day for Somalis as Barclays closes its final remittance accounts from the United Kingdom to Somalia. And Liverpool striker Luis Suarez scores twice on his return to action, pushing his club up the standings. Well, agents from the International Police Agency Interpol on Sunday joined Kenyan and other foreign investigators looking for clues behind the weekend mall attack by Al-Shabaab militants. Interpol agents were seen in a tent set up outside the Westgate shopping mall. On Thursday, Interpol issued a wanted persons alert for Samantha Lutwaite, a British citizen dubbed the White Widow after Kenya's request. The International Police Agency's red notice for her arrest said the 29-year-old Lutwaite was wanted by Kenya on charges of possession of explosives and conspiracy to commit a felony dating back to December 2011. Interpol said it had received a request from Kenyan authorities on Wednesday and had issued a first alert to its 190 member countries immediately. Meanwhile, top security chiefs are currently being questioned by members of the Kenyan Parliament's Defense Committee over alleged lapses in the security system prior to the attack. Let's get more details now on the meeting between top security chiefs in Kenya with Parliament's Defense Committee. CCTV's Robert Nagila is following the proceedings in Parliament. He joins me live now from Nairobi. Robert, the heads of the various security agencies have been summoned to appear there before the Parliamentary Defense Committee amid rising concern in Kenya over their preparedness. What is the latest from there?
Well, this is what we know. The Parliamentary Committee on Defense was supposed to have begun those proceedings looking into the National Intelligence Agency and security agencies in Kenya in connection with the Westgate attack and what role they may have played or may not have played. Now, this was supposed to have begun last week. First person to be called up was the chief in charge of the National Intelligence Service. Now, he appeared, however, he asked for some more time because of the prevailing situation at that particular time, saying that it was not conducive for him to come up with a brief because it was still being prepared and they were still looking at several angles within the investigation itself. That investigation was supposed to resume today or tomorrow. What we do know is that the Parliamentary Defense Committee will, at some point this afternoon or tomorrow, be visiting Ground Zero, the site of the attack at Westgate itself, about 5 kilometers from where we're standing outside Parliament itself. Now, some of the things that they will be looking at is, number one, the intelligence network itself. What did intelligence know at what particular point and what did they pass on? There are already reports within the local media stating that information on terror attacks within Nairobi and Westgate had been received for more than a year already. So questions are likely to be asked as to why it was not acted on. Now, there's also an intelligence report, the latest intelligence report we understand within government circles, where they were apparently informed of an attack with specific dates given between the 4th and 22nd of this month, and Westgate was one of the places mentioned as likely to be targeted by Al-Shabaab terrorists. We're also receiving reports that the Israeli embassy here in Nairobi had also passed on information to the Kenyan government. So a lot of questions being asked as to why that specific intelligence was not acted upon. However, the intelligence service saying that they did receive that information and had passed it on. Now, one of the other things that the Defense Committee will also be looking at will be the number of hostages and the number of people killed. Now, as of yesterday, the government was still saying that there are no people, hostages alive or anyone that needs to be released, whereas we've heard from the Kenya Red Cross saying that at least 39 people are still missing.
All right, Robert, though it is a parliamentary committee, they are quizzing the security chiefs. What action can Parliament take if it is confirmed that indeed there were security lapses at the Westgate Mall?
Well, this is something else that's also coming out. Now, you've got a section of the civilian population here in Kenya saying that, hang on, this was a knee-jerk reaction, it happened too fast. Parliament coming out to say that they have already begun investigations, yet the forensic audit that's being carried out by investigators from 5 or 6 countries at Westgate is not complete already. So was it premature? We don't know. We will have to wait and see how this plays out. Now, in terms of what can Parliament actually do, well, after the investigations, Parliament will come up with some recommendations. Some will be given to the relevant authorities, some to the President of the country to take action. That's as much as they can do. Whether they'll be followed or not remains to be seen. However, like I said, there is a section of people that are asking questions of this parliamentary investigation. Now, they believe that what needs to happen is immediately after this investigation is being carried out by the relevant authorities, then the President needs to come up with an inquiry, a commission of inquiry to actually look into this. A lot of people are actually saying that this is beyond the depth of Parliament, beyond the scope of Parliament itself. So we will just have to wait and see how it plays out, because in the end, what you will have is you will have Parliament coming up with one report. You'll have the investigators coming up with one report. Now, if the President does come up with a commission of inquiry to look into this, that will be a third report. Now, what happens in the likelihood that none of the reports actually coincide with each other? All right, CCTV's Robert Nagila joining us there from Parliament buildings in Nairobi. Thank you. Now, in a related development, the Asian Muslim community in Nairobi organized a human chain outside the Westgate shopping mall on Sunday. And this was meant to show solidarity with those affected by the attack, which took the lives of 67 people. Wazir Hamsin tells us more.
Hundreds of people gathered outside the shopping center to hold hands, pray, and a minute silence in memory of the victims. Militant group Al-Shabaab attacked Nairobi's upscale Westgate Mall last Saturday, setting off a 4-day siege, which resulted in the collapse of part of the mall and the death of 67, according to officials. The Red Cross says 59 people remain missing, though the government puts that number at 0.
Our hearts and prayers go out to all the people who have lost their loved ones in this tragic incident.
Another described the act as beyond the pale, adding that those who perpetrated the attack were not entitled to call themselves Muslims. Amongst those present was Hena Arain, who was in the mall with her children during the attack, but managed to hide and subsequently escape.
Well, I'm here today to show solidarity with my Kenyan brothers and sisters who lost their lives here at Westgate. I'm a Muslim, and before that, I'm a Kenyan. I was there. I was stuck in Westgate. I was there with my kids. We hid for many hours, and then we were able to escape out of there.
Meanwhile, on Sunday, shop owners and tenants gathered at the Westgate shopping mall to try salvage what was left of their investments following the attack. For tenant Jane Mwende, the loss was beyond words.
It was too much for me to really speak. There was a lot of water. So yeah, we had to go and see what was left as tenants and pick up what we could salvage.
After the human chain ceremony, participants left candles and flowers to honor the victims of the deadly attack. Wazir Hamsin, CCTV.
Let's now head down to South Africa, where the platinum sector is bracing itself for a season of tough wage negotiations between employers and unions. AMCO, the biggest union in that sector, has already called a strike at the Anglo Platinum mine. In January, Amplat announced that they would have to retrench 14,000 workers. The unions and government were in uproar, leading the management to reduce the number to a total of 6,000 workers. Angelo Coppola tells us more.
We're outside the Timberlani mine where the AMCU are striking about the retrenchments that were announced by management several months ago. 3,000 retrenchments are at stake here. AMCU are saying no way. We're waiting for leadership to arrive here, and when they do, they'll explain to the members what's actually going to happen. I'm Angelo Coppola for CCTV at the Timberlani mine in Rustenburg.
Well, South Africa's protracted industrial action comes after the country failed to reach deals with unions at the negotiation period just before August. Now, Anglo-American Platinum Amplats had initially planned to cut 14,000 jobs, but scaled that down to about 4,800 jobs after objections by the government and unions, and then now to 3,000 job cuts. That notwithstanding, union workers proceeded to down their tools in the country where unemployment is running at more than 25%. And before the platinum miners took to industrial action, gold workers, car manufacturers and petrol station workers are among sectors that have suffered workers' strikes in the last month alone, calling for the intervention of the country's President Jacob Zuma. Well, CCTV Sumitra Naidu is live for us in Johannesburg, and she joins us now with the latest. Now, it is a strike season there in South Africa, though, at the moment. Are we likely, though, to see a sustainable solution going forward in regard to AMCU?
Well, you know, this does present a problem for both sides, and it looks like neither side is going to back down. Amplats had started this process last year. As you mentioned, they announced plans to retrench 14,000 workers. And this was after it conducted a full review of all of its operations in South Africa and found that it needed to cut these jobs in order to remain viable. Last year, Amplats reported a huge loss and also suffered from the prolonged protest action that hit not only that company, but the entire platinum belt. And there's been quite a bit of negotiation between government, business and labor, and finally this number has been reduced now down to 3,000 jobs, retrenchments. From the company's point of view, there's not much more that it can do. It needs to cut these jobs. For AMCU, though, the job losses seem non-negotiable, and of course the company is now this is the leading union rather in the platinum sector. Analysts say it now needs to flex its muscles and show all of those members that it claimed from the National Union of mine workers that it was worth the move. So yes, it's going to be a tough one, and it's come down to a matter of who is going to give in first. It's as we can see from AMCU, they're not willing to back down on this.
All right, President Jacob Zuma, though, and the mining minister have previously called for an end to the strikes and have talked of tough consequences if the strike threats continue. Have these threats, though, amounted to anything?
Well, it doesn't seem like it. We have seen many of these warnings go on deaf ears. It has been relatively calm, though, compared to last year, with the violence that we saw last year. But again, there's been quite a few reports of violence in other sectors where there is a strike action, and this has really just become, part of South Africa's landscape at this point. I did ask this question previously to the National Union of Mine Workers and said, they are if the strike action continues, there's a threat of further job losses. The economy is under a lot of strain. This doesn't bode well for the workers. And the response was really that we cannot work under these conditions. We need to fight for our rights. So we will continue striking until our demands are met. So that's the kind of response that you're getting here. And it doesn't seem like they're going to really listen to those warnings coming from the President and from the Minister of Mines.
All right, Sumitra Naidu joining us there from Johannesburg. Thank you. Now, Tuareg separatists and Malian soldiers exchanged fire in the northern town of Kidal on Sunday. The clashes come 3 days after National Movement for the Liberation of Azawad rebels ended the ceasefire agreement with the new government. Local officials say Tuareg separatists attacked an army unit outside a bank in the town center, a statement that was denied by the rebels. The incident comes 2 days after a grenade attack outside the same bank in which 2 Malian soldiers were wounded. A Malian intelligence official said the clashes coincided with the arrival of more army troops in Kidal, the birthplace of a Tuareg uprising last year. The MNLA fighters had agreed to remain in barracks in Kidal in June to allow presidential elections. However, the group broke off the deal on Thursday, accusing President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta of not honoring the terms of the agreement, which called for peace talks within 2 months of him taking office. And you're watching Africa Live on CCTV News. Coming up, mounting pressure. Protests over fuel subsidies in Sudan spill over to Cairo. And we give you an insight of public transportation wars in Mozambique. Dozens of Sudanese protesters gathered on Sunday in front of the Sudanese embassy in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, to demand the resignation of Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir. The protest came after demonstrations triggered by the lifting of fuel and wheat subsidies erupted in the Sudan last week. The protesters' demands have escalated in the last few days. Sudanese police have reported at least 30 deaths nationwide, including policemen. However, non-governmental organizations claim at least 50 people have died, and doctors at Khartoum hospitals are putting the number closer to 100 killed since last Monday. Although President Bashir maintains a strong grip on power, he has been increasingly beleaguered because of Sudan's weakening economy.
Now the Sudanese people are being murdered for the sake of freedom, justice and democracy. We are gathered here today to demand the expulsion of the Sudanese ambassador.
Suspected Islamic extremists attacked an agricultural college in Nigeria early Sunday morning. According to the school's provost, the militants gunned down dozens of students as they slept in dormitories and torched classrooms. It was the latest report of violence in northeastern Nigeria. The Nigerian military has collected 42 bodies and has taken 18 wounded students to Damaturu Specialist Hospital. A surviving student, Ibrahim Mohammed, told the AP news agency that the extremists drove into the college in 2 double-cabin pickups, all-terrain vehicles and on motorcycles, some dressed in Nigerian military camouflage uniforms. He said they appeared to know the layout of the college because they attacked the 4 male hostels, but avoided the 1 hostel reserved for women. Northeastern Nigeria is under a military state of emergency to confront Boko Haram militants who have killed more than 1,700 people since 2010. The extremists want to install an Islamic state, though half the country's 160 million citizens are Christians. In other news making the headlines across the continent, the citizens of Cameroon will cast votes on Monday for the national, legislative and municipal elections. In the election postponed from last year, President Paul Biya's Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, the main opposition Social Democratic Front, and 41 other parties are contesting 180 seats in parliament and 360 municipal council positions. Paul Biya's party won a majority in April Senate elections, taking 56 of 70 seats. The twin election this time is considered likely to further consolidate its majority in the National Assembly. More than 10,000 people have applied to be observers and about 5.6 million people have registered to vote. President Paul Biya, who was re-elected in 2011, has been in power for over 30 years. Elsewhere, Guineans voted on Saturday in the first parliamentary elections for more than a decade in the West African nation. There was tight security as voters cast ballots to choose among more than 1,700 candidates vying for 114 seats in the National Assembly. The Assembly will replace the transitional body that has been running the country since military rule ended in 2010. President Alpha Condé told reporters before the vote that the elections will allow them to emerge from a chaotic 5-year transition, but that the opposition has warned of protests if they believe the results did not represent what they saw at the polling stations. Election results are expected to be announced this Tuesday. And finally, around 150 young representatives from the UNEP and 21 African countries gathered in Lomé, the Togolese capital, for the 4th African Youth Conference, Tunes Africa. The theme this year is charting a sustainable and eco-responsible Africa with the youth's contribution. The youth participants exhibited examples of concrete projects for sustainable development and also discussed waste management and the fight against deforestation. Solutions such as improved stoves which use half the fuel for cooking and techniques for recycling were also shared. Let's now go to Mozambique, where calls are growing for the government to reform transport for commuters in the capital, Maputo. Public transportation in the city has been neglected for years, and for many people, simply getting to work can be a high-risk gamble. CCTV's Julie Shear has more.
The chapas of Maputo. For most people here, they're the only way to get around town. They're certainly cheap, about 20 US cents for a 5-kilometer ride. But there's another price to pay.
The highest number of accidents and the highest numbers of deaths are due to pedestrians being run over by chapas, and chapa crashes with several passengers.
Mozambique is still rebuilding from its long years of civil war, and rebuilding a public transport system is a long way down the list. These chapas have filled the gap. Operators say they need government support to improve service and safety.
The solution to this problem is through the private sector. The government has to pay attention and look towards us to solve the situation. Only then will the transport problems be solved in our country.
Mozambique lacks even emergency services that can respond to road accidents. It's thought around 1,700 people are killed on the roads every year.
These figures are inaccurate, and the truth is there could be thousands more. A harsh reality that makes Mozambique an extremely dangerous country to drive in. Julie Shire, CCTV News, in Maputo, Mozambique.
Let's take another short break here on Africa Live, but coming up on the program. It's a bleak day for Somalis as Barclays Bank closes its final remittance accounts from the United Kingdom to Somalia. Now, today, Monday, September the 30th, marks the last day that Barclays Bank will operate remittance accounts to Somalia. A meeting between government officials, remittance companies and Barclays Bank in London on Friday failed to deliver a desirable result, leaving Somalia's lifeline hanging in the balance. Many Somalis depend on money sent back from relatives abroad for their livelihood. Reports from those who attended the meeting said that money remittance companies would work together with the British Bankers Association to provide better guidance in dealing with financial crime risk. And this is expected to be worked out in the coming weeks. However, it may not provide a solution as banks like Barclays are expected to shut their accounts to comply with international regulations, particularly from the United States. Ugandan farmers are increasingly turning to sorghum to tap into a growing demand for the crop from beer makers. One Ugandan beer brand brewed from sorghum is rapidly gaining market share. The farmers are now hoping it will bring steady prices and a whole new market. CCTV's Isabel Nakiria has more on that story.
This lush green garden of sorghum has been Samuel Adimu's source of income for years now. He doesn't regret switching from crops like maize to sorghum because he sees stable prices and his stock being bought by breweries. And with a family of 17 members, Samuel Adimu's over 10 acres of sorghum make him a comfortable man.
We benefited a lot from a growing of this apple. We benefited. I was living in a Sachti house, but now you can get me in a Mabati house. That one is, I call it, is an achievement because of this apple growing.
Sorghum was until the 1990s one of the staple crops in Uganda until brewers identified it as a raw material for beer.
We chose sorghum because sorghum was really available. It is a natural crop in Uganda, and therefore it could be adapted much more easily.
Research and trials were also carried out in eastern Uganda, where Edimu does his sorghum farming was chosen as one of the best regions in the country with a suitable climate. Several farmers are turning to growing the crop. The breweries now buy over 8,000 tons of sorghum each year from farmers.
They promoted this cotton. They said that cotton is 3,000, but in the long run, cotton failed. Even farmers now who used to go to join the growing of cotton have now come back to grow again in April.
Beer brewers say the Eagle beer, the brand made from sorghum, is now one of the biggest selling beers in Africa because it's affordable.
Government saw the importance of having a local raw material. At that time there was the poverty eradication plan. So under that plan, the government said, okay, we are going to reduce taxes, excise duty on Eagle, as long as you brew with the local raw materials.
Breweries have also started using other local raw materials like maize and barley and hope to use only locally sourced cereals, 100% for making their beer in Uganda. With the production of sorghum brewed beer increasing each year, the demand for local raw materials is also expected to grow. And Ugandan beer makers are urging the government to support farmers financially so they can meet this demand. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Jinja, Eastern Uganda.
Well, let's now take a look at how the markets performed in early morning trade. And the Nigerian all-share index was up 0.77%, while the JSE all-share traded 0.58% weaker. The Nairobi Securities Exchange 20-share index in Nairobi traded slightly stronger at 4,768.03 points, while Egypt's EGX 30 in Cairo was posted 0.64% weaker.